Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So I hope everyone's doing good. It is Tuesday at about 10:30. So yeah, thanks again to some new folks who have come aboard to subscribing to this page, and also I love people commenting. That's been great. That's been happening more and more. Commenting on the videos and making some cool recommendations and just having some cool, you know, back and forth as far as the dialogue around some of these movies. And again, most of these people that do comment are, they seem to be fellow film fanatics. They, I always feel it's a turn on when you meet people who have just an open mind. I think that goes a long way. I never kid myself into believing or thinking that, or look at things from a judgmental, viewpoint. I never kid myself into thinking that people have to, share my taste or like the things that I like. I think it's great. I think it would be the world would be really boring if everybody obviously had the same tastes and had the same opinions. But what I find really attractive about people come that I meet in passing, maybe in reality, like in person, or especially in this format where it's just, through the digital way of talking, or that's our only way of communicating, where it is impersonal. But when I get a sense that that person is open to things and has an open mind, I think that is super cool and really attractive. Just meaning that they'll be willing to take a chance, or have a broad sense of, wow, there is a lot of things out there. And it might be it might be a genre or a style that might, even to a degree, be something that they're not into, but maybe off-putting, or it could be something that they're generally they don't understand, so they pass judgment. But that I'm not really interested in at all. So I like people that they're willing to check out new things, and I've come across that with lots of folks who have been commenting on these videos, that seems to be the general consensus, and I love that. I think that sometimes is a thing or a trait that is really lacking, most of the time across the board. So today's show is going to be about a new release, even though it came out in October of last year, which is crazy. And that is the newer film, or the most recent film from Todd Field, who I think is easily one of the best and one of the most incredible directors working today. And, this is also kind of a testimony to how hard it is to see new releases for me. But again, that's due to my own habits, and that's due to my own decision making as to why it's a thing. And the reason is because, well, Tar came out in 2022, last year, and it came out in October. I know it was in the theaters. It did have a theatrical release, and the only theater that I know that it was playing in was really close by. It was playing at the Strand, which is a really beautiful theater. I used to go there fairly often, but generally it's really hard for me to make it out there for some reason, just because, well, schedule wise. But they have this thing of where when they show movies, they're only there for a brief amount of time, so it's pretty easy to miss movies that come and go. They don't really have a movie there for, like, say 2 or 3 weeks, or a month, if it's say a big successful movie, which usually prolongs the theatrical run. And generally they don't show commercial films. Like it's not going to be a place you're going to go see John Wick, for instance. They mostly show foreign films, art house films. They do show occasionally movies that are pretty high profile, but generally it's more geared towards foreign films, independent films, and it's an amazing theater. I've seen so many great movies there over the years, but it's really sporadic when I go there. But I know that they had Tar there for a few days, but I wasn't aware of it playing anywhere else. And I'm a huge fan of Todd Field. He is, again, like I said, I think he is one of the best directors around. He started off his amazing career in the bedroom and then also Little Children. And the thing with his career is that there's years upon years between the releases of the films of his. I mean, you're talking almost 10 years. I'm not quite sure why that is. I think it's probably due to maybe just how he works or trying to get the finances in order to create these films. In the bedroom, I mean, it's crazy. That came out in 2001, and that's an amazing film starring Sissy Spacek. Really incredible movie. A melodrama, but I also feel it has a big like Hitchcock flavor to it. It's a drama, but it's also got this very suspenseful element to it. Really great film. And then the film after that was Little Children, which is another really suspenseful movie. Another great character study, really dramatic, but very suspenseful, pretty dark. His movies are pretty dark. Little Children, and that came out in 2006. And Tar came out in 2022. So it's like, it's insane how many years go by, between projects for him. I'm not sure why that is, but I will say that. That being said, it's worth the wait. His films are definitely filled with all kinds of kind of complex narratives. The stories are really engaging. The scripts are tend to be pretty dense. They tackle lots of different subjects. So there's a I feel like with his work, Todd Field's work, there's like a lasting power to it. And I think most of his films have a lot of depth. So if you go back and watch them more than once, you know, you'll definitely get some other things out of those films because there's so much depth. There's an area of complexity. I feel like his films are almost like, like a peeling an onion. There's all these layers, and over time, you start discovering more and more things. Especially, I would, I just saw Tar for the first time last night, actually, and I think especially this film. This film has multiple layers. It's very dense, but again, it's a true work of art. I mean, it's I consider it to be more of an art house film, but then it also has this level of where the story gets to, of where it's pretty easy to understand what's going on. It took me to be in all honesty, this film took me a little bit to get into. It was pretty dense. It had a very At first I felt like it had a real academic approach to it. It kind of felt like in the beginning of the film, the dialogue is very dense, and it's centered on this character Tar, who's played by the brilliant Kate Blanchett, who is this world-renowned composer and conductor in the classical world. And so the story kind of opens up with her and her basically her credentials. And at first, and then it gets really, it takes a real deep dive, and where there's a serious analysis of of music, and then also just everything that involves art. I feel from the perspective of people who create art, all of the different facets that that entails, but then also from the perspective of the public, the audience, and then it also dives really deeply, especially the third act, into social media and kind of where we are now as a society, which I was really surprised. But at first, the dialogue is incredibly dense, and it's very. At first, I kind of felt like it was almost playing out like um, almost like a lecture series, or it was really steeped in all things academia, and it was really dry. But once I got my bearings with this film, I found it to be just an amazing film. I was blown away by how much depth this film has to it, and how it really raises all kinds of questions. And it really talks about the power of music, and how, you know, at the end of by the second act, I felt like, okay, I was really understanding and comprehending what was going on. I got my bearings, and I was really engaged with what was going on, and it really became a story about this woman's portrayal, who is this composer. And the way the narrative of this film is structured, it feels like it's a almost a biopic based on a real person, but it's not. And but it's such a the writing is so great that it just has such a wonderful way of kind of making you think that this is an actual character in reality. But I but it, but at the end of the day, I feel like this is such an in-depth exploration of someone who, you know, is from daily life, or their perspective from the person who's a genius, or a person whose passion is the art of music, or immersing themselves in that space to create, and all of those things that that entails. And at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, it took me a little while to get my bearings in the beginning of the film. But once you're kind of pulled in, and I was definitely about 15 or 20 minutes in, I found myself completely engaged with this film, and I thought it was truly something I've never really seen before. As far as really taking a deep dive in kind of the artistic process, you know, I thought it did such an incredible job. And then it had this other thing of where it was an interesting, almost juxtaposition, where at first it was the beginning of the narrative was the approach, and kind of the way it was laid out was kind of kind of coming from an academia kind of world, but then it it and to a degree like an intellectual stance. But then I felt like the story evolved to where it was really tangible and really easy to understand, and that at the end of the day, it really focused on where the artistic endeavor around music, where music can express certain things, you know, that are a part of the human experience on an emotional level that intellectually we can't really, you know, express, or words can't really be used to express how certain pieces of music will will move you, or how you, or and even from the viewpoint from the composer, it transcends anything around being able to articulate what that thing is. And I thought it really did an amazing job, and it really stripped it down to where it was, and it is this primal thing that goes into this area of where there is this connection, and it really is. It crosses boundaries. There are no there's no more walls around those things. And I just thought it did such a brilliant job with explaining that whole process. The movie is so beautifully shot. Uh, Todd Field, I first came across his work in Eyes Wide Shut, which I think is, one of the best. It was the last movie that Stanley Kubrick had directed. I think it's one of his best movies. But that was the first time I ever came across or saw Todd Field, and he is a character in Eyes Wide Shut. He plays a jazz piano player, Nick Nightingale, and he's so great in it. It's such an awesome role. And he's kind of a main character. He's not in the film very much, but he's kind of in a main character, And the one of the things that I got from watching Tar last night was visually, and obviously the use of music is pretty mesmerizing. But a lot of the framing of the shots, and a lot of the long shots, the big shots of where, there's lots of scenes taking place in these, big gorgeous theaters. There's a lot of these really wide shots of the different cities that she's traveling, and then also where Kate Blanchett's character Tar is, where she's at these rehearsals, and there's all these long angles, and they're beautiful and gorgeous, but they're a lot of the shots, there's so much detail, and the camera kind of stays in the scene for a long time, so you're seeing a lot. You're seeing a lot of, and you're getting a lot of information from that. And one of the things that made me think of was Stanley Kubrick. I felt like, wow, like visually, it had this Kubrick flair to it, or this. I could see the influence of Stanley Kubrick, and so I'm really curious, if that is a thing. Was that maybe a conscious decision on Todd Field's thing, on Todd, and as far as how he wanted to shoot some of these scenes, or was that a huge influence? Well, and I'm sure, you know, Kubrick was obviously a huge, inspiration for him, or is for him creatively. And and I wonder too, like his time that he spent with Stanley Kubrick, especially it being his last film, how that experience must have been, to be on set with, the greatest filmmaker of all time. Just really incredible. And if I ever got a chance to meet Todd Field, that would that would be probably the first question I would ask him, was what was it like to be on set with Stanley Kubrick, shooting Eyes Wide Shut. Because that was one of the things that really stood out for me watching this film, from a visual perspective, was that, and the use of sound and the use of music. Obviously, there's all of these little pieces and snippets, and some full pieces of music in this film the music is just incredible. But there's also the use of sound is, even on a very minimalist level, of where Kate Blanchett's character, there's all these scenes of where she is alone, and you get the sense that she can't really, you know, turn her clock off. She can't turn her brain off. She's so intelligent, highly intelligent, but and also so incredibly creative, and her brain just doesn't stop, and her pulse doesn't stop. Her whole like well-being and every fiber of her body is always searching for something. And you get that sense of where there's a lot of these really cool scenes in the film of where she is by herself, and she's kind of woken from a dream, and she's kind of in this state of where she's, in this dream state, and she'll hear these sounds. It will basically be, things like mundane sounds that we're used to, she'll hear the refrigerator buzzing in the background, or there'll be some kind of siren going off outside of her house, or the heat turning on to her house, or just some kind of low rumbling sound. And that will cause her to kind of get out of bed and to sit at a piano, and she'll have some sort of like strange inspiration from that kind of everyday mundane sound. And I thought that was really fascinating. And then also it showed her obsessiveness around it, and that she can't turn it off. And it also has a dark side to it, of where it is this obsessive part of her brain, and she can't turn that off, and it's kind of out of control. But yet it works. She works with it somehow because it's part of her, her creative genius, and it's really interesting, and it really shows too. And I feel like because of her state of her of her mind the whole time, when she is by herself, there's also situations of where she's like going for a run through a park. She becomes kind of consumed by this almost extra sense of the world around her, that she experiences this really heavy dose of disorientation. And I thought that they really captured that. Todd Field just did an amazing job of showing, the idea that an artist, of when, maybe when they're not in that creative space where they're working at, their craft, and it's a passion, it's a love, but they're driven to do it, and they're consumed by it. And there's also the aspect of where a person at that level, that thing comes before everything else in their lives. So everything else in their life, whether it's family or any other social things, friends, family, other responsibilities, all of those things kind of fall by the wayside, and they're just not as important. And you get a sense of that. And when in all of these scenes where she's by herself, and you get the sense of when she's not in that creative space, the world around her outside of that becomes very disorienting, and it doesn't really make any sense to her, because she's out of her, to a degree, like her comfort zone. And I thought that was really interesting and fascinating. I've never seen a film kind of portray that kind of that way of being. It also, to a degree, reminded me of. There's a lot of references, obviously, to all of the famed, and all of the, some of the greatest composers in the world. But there were moments in the film of where it reminded me of the film Amadeus, about Mozart. Even though that film has a different tone and it's a little bit more whimsical at times, there's also a serious thing to that film, and I thought that film also showed those kinds of traits. With what Todd Field did with Tar, especially in the quiet sections, kind of reminded me of that. And which is something, I've never really seen explored in films, as far as, what it's like for people who are creative, and that is their world. And so when they're outside of that world, how do they interact with people? And I thought that was really interesting, and it's something I've never seen before. And I thought this film did a brilliant job with really exploring that. More than anything that I can really think of. Just an amazing thing. And going into this film, I didn't know that much about this film. I knew it was about a composer, and it was about essentially art and music and all of those things. And I thought, well, maybe it could be a thing of where it could be that scenario of where you have to be a musician or somebody invested in the arts to appreciate this kind of film. And at first, you kind of get a sense that that's what is happening. Like you need to be really educated in the world of classical composers and a lot of the terminology, especially the first half of the film. And also, to a degree, you have to be incredibly well read and steeped in various forms of philosophy. But I didn't, by the second act, I didn't feel like you needed that. I think you can really be engaged by this film and just really enjoy this film without having any ties to that stuff. I think this film, even though it takes a really deep dive in that world, like an extremely deep dive, you can, come from any walk of life, and I think if you have an openness to this experience, it will make for a really great and enjoyable experience. Even like I said, not you don't have to have a connection to like you don't have to be a painter or dancer or a musician to appreciate this film. But I being I'm in the arts and stuff. I feel like I got what she was talking about. I got what they were talking about. I got that exploration of what that's kind of like, and it was from that perspective for me. It was fascinating. Like I said, I've never seen that really explored before. Just the everyday process of what that's like, and I thought that was brilliant. And it's a very dark movie. It's a little bit darker of a film than I thought because they do explore the kind of the dark ramifications of having that mindset where things can evolve into a nightmare. One of the big surprises of this film was where it really dove into the modern times of where we are now, as far as you know if you want to call it the woke kind of generation, of where now there are, every day there's some new scandal coming about some celebrity and some various form of entertainment that has some kind of allegation against him or her. And whether or not charges are pressed against this person or not, or they get convicted of something, it seems to be a thing of where, to a degree, even the talk of those accusations kills people's careers. And you hear terminology like the woke community or the Me Too generation, all these kind of silly things, but it's a real thing. And I was really surprised that this film really dove deep into that exploration as well. And I thought it did a really great job with exploring really all of these different things without it being preachy. It never really it laid out the case of kind of what it's like. This film also, the time frame of this film takes place now. So there's references to the pandemic, the COVID thing we've been going through, and just where social media is now. And I thought that was really interesting, but it does such a great job with never trying to make you have a certain opinion. I thought it had a lot of different perspectives, especially when it came to where social media is now, and where people are, where essentially a lot of careers are broken because of various accusations through social media. And this movie really dives deep into that as well. And I was really surprised that it went there. But it did an incredible job with, again, not trying to persuade you as a viewer that, well, you needed to, this is how it is, or this is from the perspective of the right, or this is the perspective of the left. It it was a very gray kind of presentation of where it was in the middle somewhere, and it just showed all of these different facets of how we kind of function now in our society. And I thought it was brilliantly handled that way, where it never was preachy. It never told. I felt like it never told me I needed to believe a certain way or to go along with an agenda. I never felt Todd Field had a an agenda with this film. Uh, just an amazing film, and I kept And again, I just saw this for the first time last night. This is definitely a film. Like I said, this is definitely a film that I want to see again because of the level of depth and detail in it. And when I said too, like in the beginning of this film, there was a level of where I got the sense that it was almost playing out like a lecture, or really steeped in the world of philosophy, or there are all of these references to a particular viewpoint on composers, the history of classical music. But I that might be too strong of a statement. I kind of actually feel that this movie has a very natural way the dialogue comes out, and the way, and I feel like people who are part of this world in the music industry, and in particular this genre, this is how they would interact, and it does have a very natural way of, if they were basically at a bar or a cafe, these are the things they would be talking about. These are the things that are their concerns, their passions. So it really has this very natural way of the way the dialogue comes across. Even though, like I said, it took me a while to kind of get my bearings. Over time, I was like, you know what, this is really interesting, because this is a world, to a degree, I don't really know all that much about, and it's a really interesting perspective. But this is, I feel at this, I felt at the same time, especially over some time, after some time had passed, this is how these people would, this is what they would be talking about in their natural habitat, and I thought that was really interesting. And so it wasn't. I would never say that this film had a thing of where it was trying to, you know, uh, use big words for the sake of using big words to describe something that is, to a degree, fundamentally basic. I felt, no, this is how people would talk in this area of the world, or in this mindset, or who have these passions and work in this, to a degree, this industry. This is how they would talk in everyday life. And I thought that was really fascinating, and it really grew on me as, okay, this feels totally organic. There's no, there is no real use of like some kind of intellectual prowess, or use of the use of big words for the use of big words. I thought, that's, it's essentially a real natural story in a natural world, but yet very complex. So a tremendous movie. Again, this movie came out in October of last year, and I just saw it. And that's one of the problems with the streaming thing for me is, and again, it's choice by choice, is I don't really stream anything, so I wait till the movies come out on DVD. But because streaming now is such a huge thing, there's a massive lag before lots of releases come out. So it takes me a while now to see new releases, but I do see them. But Tar is, without a doubt, I think it might have won some Academy Awards. I'm not totally sure, but I know it had a tremendous acclaim, and it was up for virtually every award that there was. And I definitely say that this movie is totally lives up to all its hype from what I've been hearing about this film for months. I mean, it's an incredible film, completely unique film by Todd Field, who I is easily one of the best living directors working today. The only thing I don't that's a little bit disappointing is he's so damn good as a director and writer and so creative. I just wish there were more movies. I wish it didn't take so long for him to crank out movies. But I think to a degree, maybe for the work and what he's shooting for as an artist, it could be just a thing of where it's hard for him to get financed. But I to get these things off the project and get them financed. I don't know, but I highly recommend Tar. It's an exceptional movie, just an incredible movie. Todd Field is just an amazing. I think out of the work he's done, this is probably the like his opus. Like this is an epic film, and it's an experience. It really is. It's an experience, and it's a long movie. It clocks in 2.5 hours, but I don't feel it drags. It takes a little bit of time. You gotta have a lot of patience to get into it and to kind of be open to it. But once you're into it, or once you get your bearings, like I said, and it's an extremely moving journey. So this is Jason Dean at Film Fanatic. So please check out Tar if you get a chance. It's a brilliant film, worth all of the hype and all of the acclaim that it's been getting for the past 6 months or so. So thank you again, and we will see you next time. Peace.